Hello and welcome to the Intellect's Cove. I'm Colin Fairley. I'm a pragmatist philosopher and a political theorist, and I work at Queen's University in Canada. And I am now getting into the final chapter of my book, Aging and the Ethics of Longevity Science. I'm thrilled to say that book is now available as an open access book to download for free from Oxford University Press, and I have linked access to that book in the video description. Chapter 12 is titled The Geroscience Perspective on One Health, and it is the second of two chapters of the book devoted to the linkage between healthy longevity and planetary health. And for this chapter, I'm going to release two videos. I'm going to begin first by explaining what the One Health concept is, and then elaborate on what I refer to as the Geroscience Perspective on One Health. And then in the second video, I'll anticipate a likely concern or objection that gerotherapeutics, that is, drugs that target the mechanisms of aging to slow down the rate of biological aging, might constitute what is referred to as a moral hazard to One Health. So if you recall from the beginning of the book, I identify 6 distinct benefits, potential benefits, of the ideal of rate control, which is distinct from the ideal of disease control. And the 6th and final societal implication that I identify is particularly unique to the benefits of rate control, and that is improving human, animal, and environmental health if, so there is a proviso attached to this, research on rate control is pursued in a manner informed by an ethos of planetary health stewardship through translational gerontology. So this means that if we deploy the aspirations of rate control in accordance with wisdom inquiry science, or what Philip Kitcher calls responsible biology, then I believe many health dividends will be reaped for non-human species and for planetary health more general, in addition to the aging world populations. And that is what this chapter is going to elaborate upon, building on the insights from the previous chapter, chapter 11, where I already began to address this topic. So just to recall that this book is concerned with the role of imagination in translational science and how we perceive the likely benefits and harms of different areas of biomedical science. And it's very easy for our minds to form opinions. Most of them are uninformed about the likely consequences of scientific innovation. And the pragmatist philosophers that inspire the writing of this book were well aware over a century ago that the human mind struggled to form empirically accurate moral sentiments about translational science. Recall that William James argues that the kind of default setting of the human mind is for everyone to invoke the chaotic view which they carry about with them under their hat, right? So our initial response to imagination when we think about translational science is something like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, rather than an empirically informed and more accurate view of the benefits and potential harms of translational science. And John Dewey, my favorite pragmatist philosopher, argued that science is still too recent to have been absorbed into imaginative and emotional disposition, right? So what I'm really hoping this book can do is to help augment the exercise of imagination and emotional disposition when it comes to the science of healthy aging. And in an earlier chapter of the book, chapter 1, video 3 for this channel, where I talked about the importance of framing experimental science, and I used the example of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as the example we want to avoid. A frame can be defined as the basic conceptual and ideological framework through which events are presented, and as a result to which they come to be given one dominant or primary meaning rather than another. So I am invoking a distinctive frame in chapter 12, the frame that contends that translational gerontology is a critical element of the One Health, the aspirations of One Health, that promoting healthy human longevity by expanding healthspan and shrinking the gap between lifespan and healthspan will reap many benefits for planetary health and non-human health as well as human health. Now, the inspiration for writing this chapter came from a call for papers that I saw in the journal Bioscience back in 2024. And at that stage, I was working towards the final stages of the book. And I thought to myself, well, here would be a great opportunity to expand upon some of the insights that I had published earlier in papers in Aging Science and in the Royal Society's Biology Letters. And so I wrote a chapter distinctively, originally for the Bioscience collection, which I'm happy to say was published in 2025. And then I incorporated that into chapter 12. So that original article serves as the foundation for this final chapter of Aging and the Ethics of Longevity Science. Right, so here is an image that I utilize in that journal article. The idea of the One Health concept is to look at the important linkage and interdependence between human, animal, and planetary health. And so I have some images here, humans exercising and eating a balanced and healthy diet with our companion pets and experimental laboratory animals, and then healthy environments, the cities in which we live, the ecosystems of the world. And I'm going to expand upon this in a little bit more detail. So what is the One Health concept? Well, it's become very prominent at the intersection of human and veterinary medicine. It fosters collaborations at the intersection of human, animal, and environmental health. And to date, the greatest acceptance of the concept has been in the developing world, where there are significant health impacts from the control of infectious diseases. So originally, this concept was employed to enhance our deliberations about the importance of mitigating communicable diseases. And I want to argue we can expand that to the chronic conditions of later life and to healthy aging more generally. So here's an example of the interconnection between human and veterinary medicine. The primary concern is with preventing zoonotic spillover. So animals and humans can pass diseases back and forth. Think about our companion pets. In particular, young children can be prone to things like worms from their dogs and their cats. And older adults are also more susceptible to many of the infectious diseases that can be transmitted by our companion pets. So here I have a picture of my companion, Mo, is a Teddy Roosevelt Terrier, and my health and my dog Mo's health are interlinked in important ways, right? So if Mo picks up ticks and brings them back into the house, that poses a risk to me. And conversely, I could also transmit disease to him. And when we think about non-communicable diseases, so, Mo and I go for walks every day. This is critical for his health, but also for mine. So as Mo gets older, if my primary source of exercise was walking my dog, and now Mo's mobility is limited in later life, that may actually adversely impact my own health if I didn't have other ways of engaging in physical exercise. And conversely, if I was unable to go for regular walks, this would also pose some threat to Mo's health, because he would have less walks if the owner is no longer capable of going for regular physical activity with their companion pet. So I really like how the One Health concept emphasizes the interdependence between human and non-human health. Companion pets is just one domain, but I'm going to extrapolate to a variety of other linkages between human and non-human species health. So the Dog Aging Project, which I already unpacked in the chapter on the video on chapter 11, video 2, there's fascinating research on the interdependence between human and dog health. And the Dog Aging Project is also a great example of where the testing of molecules that may extend health span for companion animals is also being tested on. So, development of gerotherapeutics could be of great benefit to both companion pets and to humans. It's not simply about extending the duration of healthy life for humans, though that, of course, is a primary concern for the field. So let me unpack a little bit more. What is the One Health concept? This is just a snippet from the book. The history of the One Health concept is long and varied. Evans and Layton contend that its origins and development can be traced back to Aristotle through to Zubikity. And the interdependence of humans, animals, and respect for land and water has been an intrinsic part of the culture and spiritual beliefs of many ancient civilizations and indigenous people, right? So it tracks the wisdom of many historical cultures throughout the world to recognize that our remaining healthy is linked to how healthy other species are in our immediate and not so immediate environments. And my goal in this chapter is to expand the concern about preventing infectious diseases by invoking the One Health concept to the chronic conditions of later life and the aspirations of healthy longevity more generally. So I really want to invoke, as I discussed in earlier sections of the book, the role of imagination and idealism that the pathologist Christian Herder invoked in his 1910 JAMA address, Imagination and Idealism in Medical Science. And there, Herder encouraged us to see science as being plastic, that is, capable of modification and modulation in light of new empirical insights and new challenges that populations face with respect to their health. And this is particularly important in an aging world where the One Health concept, I would argue, should be expanded to be concerned with preventing the onset of the chronic conditions of later life. And in particular, I'm going to emphasize what he referred to as the curiosity-oriented medical science. So when it comes to extending translational gerontology to the One Health concept, I'm going to identify both what Herder referred to as humanitarian medicine, that is, the direct and obvious ways of ameliorating human suffering from the onset of chronic disease, and then the curiosity-oriented medical science that may reveal indirect ways of promoting health. And that is what the development of geroprotective drugs, I will argue, offers in the 21st century. So I want to expand the One Health concept's remit to the chronic conditions of later life and not simply with communicable diseases, though that, of course, still remains a critical aspiration for public health in the 21st century. So this is the image I want to amplify and begin to get a conversation about how can public health be utilized in the aspirations of the One Health concept can be applied to public health so that we promote healthy human longevity in ways that are beneficial to non-human species as well as to planetary health more generally. And the foundational premise of the Geroscience perspective on One Health is to see human healthy aging as interdependent with animal and environmental health. This, I believe, is both empirically accurate, but it also is a moral constraint on the way we invoke our imagination and communicate about what translational gerontology is likely to be capable of realizing. And as I mentioned, we can make a twofold distinction between the humanitarian medicine component of the Geroscience perspective on One Health and the curiosity-oriented. And both of these are critically important, I would argue. The humanitarian medicine are the non-pharmacological interventions to increase healthspan, right? So this category, pretty much like everybody, I don't know anybody who's opposed to the non-pharmaceutical interventions to increase healthspan. So these would be things like ensuring that we redress poverty and unhealthy diets and sedentary lifestyle. And this would also cover, the life course exposure to environmental risks. So that would cover the infectious diseases, the risk of a spillover of infectious diseases from non-humans to humans and vice versa. But then the experimental component part of the Geroscience perspective is the one that I think requires more detail to be provided to allow our imagination to see this as a meaningful element of the One Health project. Experimental research on laboratory animals has revealed that the rate of biological aging is malleable and that the healthspan can be increased with drugs. So applied to humans, companion and agricultural animals that I expanded upon in the last chapter, this can help narrow the disparity between healthspan and lifespan. And that is a critical, distinctive aspiration of the Geroscience perspective on One Health. It's not simply trying to extend duration of life, it's trying to compress the gap between healthspan and lifespan by increasing the duration of healthy life expectancy. All right, so here's a full kind of visual filling in a little bit more details. When we think about the non-pharmacological interventions that can alter a population's susceptibility to accelerated aging, air pollution, sedentary lifestyle, heat events, empirical research now in the epigenetics of aging shows that exposure to repeated heat stress can accelerate the rate of aging. Unhealthy diets, poverty, social isolation. So these should remain, we should remain vigilant in trying to redress these extrinsic risk factors that can bring on the onset of accelerated aging, leading to the onset of chronic disease, frailty, and disability. And then on the other side are the potential pharmaceutical interventions. And so I just have an image of gerotherapeutics and how they can apply to the healthy aging of humans, to companion animals, and agricultural animals. I discussed agricultural animals and companion animals a little bit more in chapter 11, so I won't repeat that. But these are all, I think, significant components of the Geroscience perspective on One Health. And I want to open our eyes, so I have the eyeball moving around to say, don't forget about innovation in translational gerontology, so that we're not only focusing on non-pharmacological interventions. So that is a summary of the introductory insights of what I refer to as the Geroscience perspective on One Health. There are particular concerns and maybe even an objection that the geroconservative critic is likely to raise, and that is going to be the focus of the next video around the topic of would gerotherapeutics constitute a moral hazard to One Health. So that will be the next video.